I could feel the tension in the air the moment I stepped into our house. Something wasn't right, but I couldn't place it immediately. My wife, Anna, was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping her tea, her eyes fixed on the cup in front of her. The usual warmth in her gaze was absent, replaced by a cold, distant look that sent a chill down my spine. "How was your day?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though the unease gnawed at my gut. I had noticed changes in her behavior over the past few weeks, whispered phone calls, late-night texts, and a certain restlessness whenever I tried to get close. She looked up at me, her expression blank. "It was fine," she said curtly, before returning her focus to the tea. I stood there, unsure of what to do. The silence between us had grown thick, almost suffocating. For months, I had been trying to shake off the nagging feeling that something was going on, but I didn't have proof. Maybe it was just the stress from work getting to me. Or maybe, just maybe, I was being paranoid. But then again, I had seen her phone light up late at night with messages from a number she wouldn't explain. She'd laugh softly to herself, quickly hiding the screen whenever I was near. When I confronted her once, she brushed it off as just a friend. But I wasn't so sure. "I'm going out tonight," she said suddenly, snapping me back to the present. I raised an eyebrow. "Again? You've been out a lot lately, Anna." She shrugged, not even bothering to look at me this time. "It's just dinner with some friends." Friends? That word left a bitter taste in my mouth. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying, but I didn't have any proof, not yet. My mind raced, trying to think of what to say, but nothing seemed right. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything. What if I was wrong? "Okay," I said quietly, watching her get up and leave the room. The click of her heels echoed through the hallway as she made her way upstairs to get ready. I stared at the spot where she had been sitting, a storm of emotions building inside me. I wanted to trust her. I needed to trust her. But trust without truth felt hollow, and deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The night passed slowly, and I found myself pacing the living room, glancing at the clock every few minutes. Midnight came and went, and still, Anna hadn't returned. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. My heart was pounding in my chest, each unanswered call deepening my suspicion. Finally, around 2 a.m., the door creaked open. I rushed to the hallway, and there she was, standing in the doorway with a faint smile on her lips. "You're late," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, though I could feel the anger bubbling beneath the surface. "Yeah, lost track of time," she replied nonchalantly, brushing past me. I grabbed her arm, gently but firmly. "Anna, where were you?" She stopped, her body tense. She didn't turn to face me, and for a moment, the silence between us stretched on. Then, without warning, she pulled her arm free and headed upstairs without a word. I stood there, stunned. What had just happened? My mind raced with questions, each one darker than the last. Had she been with someone else? Was she hiding something from me? The more I thought about it, the more it all started to make sense. Her distant behavior, the secrecy, the late nights. I needed to know the truth. The next morning, I decided I couldn't just let this go. After Anna left for work, I grabbed her phone. She had gotten smarter over time, locking it with a password, but I had watched her enough to guess it. My hands were trembling as I unlocked it. And then I saw it. The messages. Dozens of them. I scrolled through the texts, my blood boiling with each line I read. There were pictures too, nothing explicit, but enough to confirm my worst fears. The messages were flirtatious, intimate. She was meeting him tonight. Again. I dropped the phone on the table, feeling the world spin around me. My chest tightened, my breath shallow. I had suspected, but seeing it, knowing it for sure, was like a knife to the gut. How could she do this to me? After everything we had been through, all the years we had spent together, I had loved her, still loved her, and she was doing this behind my back? I needed to confront her. But more than that, I needed to know why. I needed answers. That night, I waited for her to come home again. This time I was ready. I wouldn't let her brush me off like before. When she walked through the door, I stood up from the couch, my heart racing, anger coursing through my veins. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low, barely containing the fury inside me. She looked at me, surprised by my tone. What about? I tossed her phone onto the table between us. About this. Her face paled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw fear in her eyes. She glanced at the phone, then back at me, but she didn't say a word. Who is he, Anna? I demanded. Who the hell is he? Anna's eyes darted from the phone to my face, her lips twisting into a bitter smirk. Gone was the fleeting fear I had seen earlier, replaced now with a cold, calculating look. The sweetness she had once masked herself with had evaporated in an instant, revealing a side of her I had never seen before, one that was brazen, unapologetic, and dangerously confident. You went through my phone, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. She folded her arms across her chest and leaned against the doorway as if this whole situation was nothing but a mild inconvenience. How pathetic. I could feel the heat rising to my face. Are you seriously standing there acting like I'm the problem? I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. Who is he, Anna? Tell me. She sighed, rolling her eyes like she was bored of the conversation already. Why does it matter? She asked casually, tossing her hair over her shoulder. It's not like you're going to do anything about it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The audacity, the sheer arrogance, left me speechless for a moment. Anna, the woman I had once thought was my partner, my equal, was now standing in front of me like she held all the cards. Like she didn't care at all. You're unbelievable, I muttered, shaking my head. What the hell happened to you, Anna? How did we end up here? She scoffed, pushing herself off the doorframe and walking over to the couch, where she casually sank into the cushions. We ended up here because you were too blind to see what was right in front of you. You're so boring, so predictable, she said, her voice laced with contempt. I needed more than what you could give me. And you know what? I deserve more. My chest tightened as her words cut deep. Boring? Predictable? Was that really how she saw me? After everything we'd built together, after the years we spent side by side, she saw me as some kind of placeholder in her life? More? I echoed, my voice filled with disbelief. What the hell does that mean? You're married to me, Anna. We vowed. She waved her hand dismissively, interrupting me mid-sentence. Spare me the righteous speech, okay? Don't act like you're some kind of saint. Maybe if you weren't so busy being perfect, I wouldn't have had to go looking for what I really wanted. The venom in her words stung more than I cared to admit. I stood there, clenching my fists, trying to wrap my mind around what she was saying. I couldn't believe it. This was Anna, the woman I had loved, supported, and cherished for years. How had it come to this? When had she turned into this heartless, unfeeling person standing in front of me? Is that it, then? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. You don't love me anymore, is that what you're saying? She tilted her head slightly, as if pondering the question, and then shrugged. I don't know, maybe I never did. Maybe I was just playing the part because it was easier. But now, I'm done pretending. Her words were like knives, each one sharper than the last. She was done pretending? All those years, all those memories had meant nothing to her? I wanted to scream, to demand answers, but I knew deep down there was no point. The woman standing before me wasn't the same person I had married. This was someone else, someone cruel, someone who didn't care about the destruction she was causing. So what now? I asked bitterly. You just keep seeing this guy behind my back? Or are you going to walk out the door and leave me with nothing? Anna smiled, a slow, twisted smile that sent a chill down my spine. Oh, I'm not going anywhere, she said, her voice eerily calm. Why would I? This is my house too. And besides, I'm having way too much fun. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Fun? She was treating this like it was some kind of game. My mind raced, trying to understand her motivations, but all I could see was the coldness in her eyes, the complete lack of remorse. You're sick, I whispered, more to myself than to her. What happened to you, Anna? She laughed, an actual laugh, as if I had said something funny. Nothing happened to me, Tom. I just woke up. I realized I didn't have to play by the rules anymore. I don't owe you anything. And honestly... She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a low, taunting whisper. You're too weak to do anything about it. Her words reverberated in my head, igniting a fury I hadn't felt before. She thought I was weak? That I would just sit here and take this? I took a step closer to her, my hands trembling at my sides. Don't test me, Anna, I warned, my voice dangerously low. You think you can walk all over me, but I promise you, you're going to regret this. She raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. Oh really? And what are you going to do, Tom? Cry about it? Call a lawyer? Please, I know you're all bark and no bite. I clenched my jaw, struggling to contain the rage boiling inside me. Every word she spoke pushed me closer to the edge. The worst part was she believed every word she was saying. She truly believed I wouldn't fight back. That I would just sit here, powerless, while she tore my world apart. You've made your choice, I said, my voice thick with anger. But don't think for a second that I'm just going to let you get away with this. Anna stood up, walking over to me slowly, a wicked gleam in her eyes. She stood inches away from me, her breath hot against my face. You don't have a choice, she whispered, her lips curling into a cruel smile. You're going to watch me do whatever the hell I want. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. The days that followed were a blur of confusion, anger, and helplessness. Anna made no effort to hide her affair anymore, flaunting it like some kind of twisted badge of honor. I'd hear her on the phone at night, laughing, her voice dripping with flirtation, while I sat alone in our bedroom, trying to make sense of what my life had become. She wasn't even trying to lie about where she was going anymore. I felt trapped in a marriage that was crumbling before my eyes and unable to stop the destruction. She had me cornered, psychologically beaten down to a point where confronting her seemed pointless. But I was far from broken. It was a Tuesday night when things escalated, the night that would change everything. I had come home late from work, mentally exhausted from a day that felt like it dragged on forever. The house was dark, eerily quiet, but Anna's car was parked in the driveway. Normally, I would have been relieved to find her home. But now, every time I saw her, my stomach twisted with dread. As I walked through the hallway, I noticed something odd. The living room door was slightly ajar, and I could hear muffled voices coming from inside. My heart began to race. There was something sinister about the way the house felt, like I had just walked into a trap. I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Anna was standing in the middle of the room, dressed in a sheer black nightgown that left little to the imagination. But she wasn't alone. There were 3 men with her, lounging casually on the couch, grinning as if they owned the place. They looked like predators circling their prey, and Anna, it seemed, was happy to be at the center of their attention. What the hell is this? I demanded, my voice hoarse with shock. Anna turned to me, her expression calm and amused, like she had been expecting me all along. She walked toward me slowly, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor with each step. The men didn't move. They just watched, their eyes flickering between her and me, waiting for whatever was about to happen next. This, she said with a smile, gesturing toward the men casually. This is what I've been wanting, Tom. Something real. Something exciting. I stood frozen, trying to process her words. My mind screamed at me to do something, to stop this madness, but my body felt paralyzed. The smug satisfaction in her eyes, the way she carried herself, it was like she was daring me to react, daring me to break. You can't be serious, I whispered, my voice barely audible. This isn't a game, Anna. She laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the room. Oh, but it is. And you, Tom, are going to be a part of it. Before I could even begin to understand what she meant, 2 of the men stood up, moving toward me with deliberate slowness, like lions stalking their prey. Panic surged through me, but I was too late. They grabbed me, their hands rough and unyielding, forcing me into a chair. My heart pounded in my chest as they tied my wrists to the armrests with thick, coarse rope. Let me go! I shouted, struggling against the restraints, but my efforts were futile. They were stronger than I could ever be in that moment. Anna stood in front of me now, a wicked glint in her eye as she watched the men finish tying me up. You've always been so easy to control, Tom, she said softly, her voice dripping with satisfaction. And now you're going to see what control really looks like. The third man, who had remained seated until now, stood up and began unbuttoning his shirt, his gaze fixed on Anna as if I wasn't even there. My stomach churned with disgust, and I thrashed against the ropes, but it was no use. They were too tight, cutting into my skin. Anna turned her back to me, walking toward the third man as if she was some kind of queen preparing to entertain her court. She let the thin straps of her nightgown slip off her shoulders, the fabric pooling at her feet, leaving her bare and exposed. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice cracking with desperation. "Anna, don't do this. Please." But she ignored me, turning her head just enough to glance at me over her shoulder, a smirk playing at the corner of her lips. "Oh, Tom," she purred, "this is what I want. And you're going to watch every second of it." I wanted to scream, to rip myself free, but the ropes held fast, binding me to the chair like a prisoner in my own home. The men closed in around her, their hands reaching for her body, and my mind spun with disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Not like this. But it was. The next hour was a blur of madness and humiliation, a nightmare that I couldn't escape. Anna's laughter filled the room as she reveled in the attention of these strangers, each one taking his turn while I was forced to sit there, powerless. My mind screamed for it to stop, but my body had long since given up the fight. At some point, I stopped yelling, stopped struggling, and just watched in stunned silence. It was as if I had left my own body, floating above the scene like a detached observer. I couldn't feel anything anymore, just a numb, hollow ache that consumed me entirely. When it was over, Anna gathered her clothes and slipped them back on as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The men left without a word, not even sparing me a glance as they walked out the door. It was just me and her now, alone in the dimly lit room, the air thick with the stench of betrayal. She turned to me, her face flushed with satisfaction, and slowly approached, her fingers lightly tracing the back of the chair. "How does it feel, Tom?" she asked, her voice low and teasing. "To be so powerless?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat was raw, my mind shattered. I just stared at her, this woman I had once called my wife, trying to reconcile the person standing in front of me with the one I had loved for so many years. She bent down, her lips brushing against my ear as she whispered, "This is the new normal. Get used to it." And with that, she walked out of the room, leaving me bound to the chair, broken, humiliated, and consumed by a darkness I had never known before. The silence that followed after she left was suffocating, a dark cloud hanging over me as I sat there, bound and utterly powerless. My mind raced through every emotion, anger, disgust, humiliation. I couldn't fathom how my life had crumbled to this point. The ropes dug into my skin, a painful reminder of just how trapped I had been, not just physically but emotionally, for so long. Anna had played her part well, keeping me in the dark, manipulating me until she could reveal her true self in the most twisted way possible. But this was the last straw. Something snapped inside me. A primal rage took over, something I hadn't felt before. I struggled violently against the ropes, pulling, yanking, until the bindings finally gave way. My wrists burned as the coarse rope tore at my skin, but I didn't care. I was free, and the fury inside me had reached its boiling point. I stormed out of the room, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I could hear her upstairs, humming to herself like nothing had happened, like she hadn't just torn my world apart and left me for dead. Every step I took toward her was fueled by pure rage. She thought she could humiliate me? Make me watch as she paraded her infidelity in front of me, like I was some kind of pathetic bystander? She had no idea what was coming. I reached the bedroom door and flung it open with such force that it slammed against the wall, the sound reverberating through the house. Anna spun around, startled, her eyes widening when she saw the look on my face. For the first time, there was no smugness, no arrogance. Just fear. "Tom," she started, but I cut her off with a roar. "Shut up," I shouted, my voice shaking with fury. "I've had enough of your bullshit, Anna." She stepped back, her hands instinctively coming up to shield herself. "What the hell are you doing?" I advanced toward her, every muscle in my body tense, ready to explode. What am I doing? I spat, my voice dripping with venom. What the hell do you think I'm doing? You think you can treat me like this? You think you can just humiliate me, parade me around like I'm nothing? Anna backed up against the wall, her bravado crumbling. I could see the panic setting in, the way her eyes darted toward the door, calculating her chances of escape. Tom, calm down, she stammered, her voice shaky. You're overreacting. Overreacting? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that came from deep inside me. I've been nothing but loyal to you. I trusted you, I loved you, and this is how you repay me. I grabbed her arm, yanking her toward me. She gasped, trying to pull away, but I wasn't letting go this time. You made me watch, Anna. You made me watch them. My voice cracked, filled with the raw pain of betrayal. I gave you everything and you just threw it all away for what? A bunch of strangers. Let go of me, she screamed, but I was past the point of caring. You wanted power? I hissed, pulling her closer until our faces were inches apart. Well, guess what, Anna? You don't have it anymore. She was trembling now, her eyes wide with terror. For the first time, she wasn't the one in control. She wasn't the one calling the shots, and she knew it. You're going to regret this, I snarled, my grip tightening. I promise you, Anna, you are going to regret everything. I shoved her away from me, watching as she stumbled and fell to the floor. She looked up at me, fear and shock written all over her face. I could see it now, she had never expected me to stand up to her. She had never thought I had it in me. Get up, I growled, standing over her. Get up and get the hell out of my house. She blinked as if she hadn't heard me right. What? You heard me, I shouted, my voice booming through the room. Get now. Anna scrambled to her feet, still in disbelief. You can't be serious. This is our house. No, Anna, I said, my voice cold and steady. This is my house. And you're not welcome here anymore. She stared at me, her lips parted in shock. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to figure out her next move. She wasn't used to being on the losing side, wasn't used to me pushing back. For years, she had controlled the narrative, but not anymore. Where am I supposed to go? She asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. I don't care, I snapped. Go to your lover, go to hell for all I care. But you're not staying here. Anna's face twisted with fury, her eyes narrowing as she realized that I wasn't backing down. The woman who had once been so smug and untouchable was now desperate, scrambling for some way to regain control. But it was too late. You're going to regret this, she spat, venom in her voice. You think you can just throw me out? After everything? You think you're going to get away with this? I'm already away from you, I replied, my voice steady. And that's all I need. She stood there for a moment, shaking with rage, but there was nothing she could do. I had taken the power back, and she knew it. Without another word, she turned and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I followed her downstairs, making sure she didn't try anything. She grabbed her keys and purse from the counter, her hands shaking with fury. As she reached for the door, she turned back to me one last time, her eyes filled with hatred. This isn't over, Tom, she said, her voice low and dangerous. You'll see. But I didn't respond. I just watched as she walked out of the house, slamming the door behind her. The sound echoed through the empty hallway, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. Alone but free. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, my chest heaving with the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. My mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. She was gone. Really gone. But the weight of what had just occurred hadn't fully hit me yet. I was still in shock, still reeling from the whirlwind of emotions that had torn through me in the past hour. Part of me wanted to collapse, to scream, to cry. But another part of me, the part that had been crushed under her control for so long, felt something else. Relief. I had taken back my life. It had taken everything in me, but I had done it. She was out of my house, out of my life. And as much as I knew the fight wasn't over, as much as I knew she would try to come back, try to twist things her way again, I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. The night after she left, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying the events of the evening over and over again. Her words echoed in my head, "This isn't over, Tom. You'll see." I knew Anna too well. She wasn't the type to simply walk away. She would try to claw her way back into my life somehow, make me pay for standing up to her. But she had no idea what was coming. I was done playing the victim. I wasn't going to wait for her next move, I was going to strike first. And I wasn't just going to hurt her. I was going to destroy everything she had built. Every smug smile, every sick pleasure she had taken from humiliating me would be repaid tenfold. I could feel the cold determination solidifying in my chest. It was time for revenge. The next morning, I took the day off work. I needed time to plan, to think, and more importantly, to gather information. I started by digging into her life in a way I hadn't before. I had been passive for too long, accepting her lies, her deceit. But now, I was done with that. I started with her phone. She hadn't taken it when she left in her fury the night before. I knew exactly where she kept her backup phone, hidden in a drawer under some old clothes. She wasn't as clever as she thought. I went through everything: messages, contacts, call logs. There were more names than just the 3 men I had seen that night. It turned out her little escapades had been going on for much longer, with a much larger group of people than I had imagined. There was one name that kept coming up: Derek. He had texted her repeatedly, and from the content of their messages, it was clear he was more than just some random fling. He had been involved in orchestrating that night. That night of humiliation. I clenched my jaw as I read through their conversations, fury bubbling inside me. They had laughed about it. She had laughed about it. But it wasn't just the affair. There was more. The deeper I dug, the more I found. Illegal dealings, shady business. Anna had been involved in things I never could have imagined. And that was the key. It wasn't just about personal revenge anymore. It was about ruining her completely. I pulled up Derek's contact and made a call. Derek picked up on the 3rd ring, his voice gruff and impatient. "Who the hell is this?" "Tom," I replied calmly, keeping my tone even, though my heart pounded in my chest. "Anna's husband." There was a brief pause on the other end, then a soft chuckle. "Oh, the husband. Surprised you're calling me after everything." I gritted my teeth, forcing myself to remain calm. "I'm not interested in playing games. I want to meet." "Meet? What for?" His tone shifted, suspicious now. "I'm not stupid. I know what's been going on. I know you've been helping her. But I also know you have a lot more to lose than she does." I let the words hang in the air for a moment, giving him time to process. "We need to talk." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally he spoke, his voice lower, more cautious. "Where?" I told him the place and time, then hung up without another word. My heart raced with anticipation, but also with a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. This was my first step. Derek had no idea what was coming. That evening, I drove to the meeting spot, a quiet, out-of-the-way bar where no one would pay attention to 2 strangers having a conversation. I arrived early, taking a seat at a corner table where I could see the entrance. My mind was sharp, my plan clear. Derek walked in 10 minutes later, his broad frame cutting through the dim light. He scanned the room, and when his eyes landed on me, his lips twisted into a smirk. He walked over, sitting down across from me with the casual arrogance of a man who thought he was in control. "So, what's this about?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "You here to beg for your wife back?" I stared at him coldly, letting the silence stretch on until his smirk began to falter. "No," I said quietly. "I'm here to make you an offer." His eyebrows raised slightly, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "An offer? Now this should be interesting." "You've been screwing my wife, and you've been helping her humiliate me," I began, keeping my voice steady. "But you're not the one I'm after. You're just a pawn in her game." Derek's eyes narrowed, and he shifted uncomfortably. I could see the gears turning in his head, the realization that this wasn't going the way he had expected. "I don't care about you," I continued. "What I care about is making sure Anna pays for what she's done. But if you help me, I'll make sure you walk away from this without a scratch." He snorted, crossing his arms. "And why the hell would I help you?" Because if you don't, I said, leaning forward, I'm going to ruin both of you. I know about your little side business. The drugs, the money laundering. I know everything, Derek. And I have the evidence to bury you. His smirk vanished instantly, replaced by a hard, dangerous glare. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, tapping the screen a few times before sliding it across the table to him. His eyes widened as he scrolled through the texts, the bank transfers, the incriminating messages. His hands began to shake slightly. Where the hell did you get this? He growled, his voice low and threatening. Anna's phone, I replied coolly. Turns out she wasn't as careful as she thought. He stared at the screen for a long moment, his jaw clenched tight. I could see the fear in his eyes now, the realization that I had him cornered. He was trapped. So, here's how this is going to work, I said, leaning back in my chair. You're going to help me take her down. You're going to tell me everything you know about her plans, her contacts, everything. And in return, I'll make sure none of this gets out. You walk away clean. But if you try to screw me over... Derek looked up at me, his expression dark, but I could see the resignation in his eyes. He knew he was beaten. What do you want? He asked quietly. I smiled, feeling the weight of control settle back into my hands. I want to destroy her. And you're going to help me do it. The days after my meeting with Derek passed in a blur of careful planning. My initial rage had simmered into something colder, more dangerous. I no longer just wanted revenge. I wanted to dismantle Anna's life piece by piece. Every step had to be calculated, precise, so when her world crumbled around her, she wouldn't even see it coming. Derek had given me more than I expected. Once he realized he had no way out, he was eager to spill everything, names, dates, places. Anna's infidelity had been the tip of the iceberg. She was tangled in a web of illegal dealings, far worse than anything I could have imagined. I had enough dirt on her to destroy not only her reputation but also her freedom. But that wasn't enough for me. I wanted her to feel the pain I had felt. I wanted her to lose everything. And I had the perfect way to do it. It was Friday night when I made my move. Anna had been laying low since I kicked her out, but I knew she wasn't going to disappear. She was too proud, too angry. I had kept tabs on her through Derek and my own connections. She had rented a small apartment on the outskirts of town, living quietly for now, but I knew she was plotting. She always was. I sent her a message from a burner phone, knowing exactly how to push her buttons. We need to talk. I've thought about everything. Meet me at our house tonight. It didn't take long for her to reply. I'll be there at 9. She would come. I knew she couldn't resist. She thought I was weak, thought I would beg her to come back, to forgive her. She couldn't have been more wrong. By the time 9 p.m. rolled around, I was ready. I had carefully staged the living room to make it look like I was trying to set the scene for some kind of reconciliation. Candles, wine, even soft music playing in the background. I wanted her to believe, for just a moment, that I had been broken down, that I was willing to grovel to get her back. But this wasn't about groveling. This was about revenge. I heard her car pull up outside, the sound of her heels clicking on the driveway as she approached the door. My heart pounded in my chest, but not with fear. This time, it was anticipation. I had waited for this moment, and now it was finally here. The door creaked open, and Anna stepped inside, her eyes immediately scanning the room. She paused for a moment, taking in the scene, a slight smile curling at the edges of her lips. She thought she had me. Tom, she said softly, her voice dripping with false sweetness. So, you've finally come to your senses. I forced myself to smile, playing the part. I've had a lot of time to think. She walked further into the room, her confidence growing as she saw the setup. I knew you'd realize how much you needed me, she said, her voice filled with arrogance. You're not the kind of man who can live without me. And after everything that happened. She trailed off, her eyes narrowing slightly. I assume you're ready to forgive and forget. My hands clenched at my sides, but I kept my voice calm. Something like that. She smiled wider now, walking over to the table where the wine was waiting. I knew it. I always knew you weren't strong enough to let me go. She poured herself a glass, sipping it slowly as she surveyed the room, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. For a moment, I said nothing, letting her bask in her own delusion. She really thought I was going to take her back, that I would crawl back into her arms like a broken man. She had no idea what was coming. You know, Anna, I said quietly, stepping closer, you're right. I've realized I can't live without you. She looked at me, her smile turning triumphant. I knew it. I moved closer, my voice low, almost a whisper. I realized that I need closure. That I need to make sure you pay for everything you've done. Her smile faltered, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of my words. What the hell are you talking about? I stepped back, pulling out my phone and tapping the screen. Suddenly, the room was filled with a recording, her voice, laughing, joking, with Derek and her other lovers. The sounds of that night. The night she had made me watch. The men's voices, her moans, everything was there. Her face went pale as the realization hit her. Where did you get that? She hissed, her voice low and dangerous. I have everything, Anna, I said coldly. Everything. I have recordings of your little affair, your drug deals, your money laundering. All of it. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows. Her eyes widened in shock, but I could see the panic beginning to set in. You wouldn't dare, she stammered. I smiled, a slow, cruel smile. Oh, I would. In fact, I already have. The files are in the hands of a very trustworthy lawyer. If anything happens to me, or if I don't call him by tomorrow morning, everything goes public. Your lovers, your crimes, your entire life laid bare for the world to see. She stood there, frozen, her glass of wine trembling in her hand. You're bluffing. Try me, I said, my voice calm and steady. You've taken everything from me. Now it's my turn. Her face contorted with rage, and she slammed the glass down on the table, the sound of it shattering echoing through the room. You bastard! She screamed, her voice shrill and filled with hatred. You think you can get away with this? You think you're going to ruin me? I don't think, Anna, I said, stepping closer. I know. She lunged at me, her fists flying, but I was ready. I caught her arms, pushing her back with a force that sent her stumbling. Don't touch me, I growled. You don't get to play the victim here. Not after everything you've done. She looked up at me, her face flushed with fury, but there was fear in her eyes now. Real fear. What do you want? She asked, her voice shaking. What do you want from me? I stared down at her, the woman who had once been my wife, now reduced to a shadow of her former self. I want you gone, I said coldly. Out of my life. Out of this town. If I ever see you again, if I hear your name again, I'll make sure those files go public. You'll lose everything, your money, your connections, your freedom. You'll rot in a cell, Anna. That's a promise. She stood there, breathing heavily, her eyes wide with terror. For the first time, she was seeing me for what I had become, someone she couldn't control, someone who had the power to ruin her. You can't do this, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I already have, I replied, my voice ice cold. I didn't say another word. I didn't need to. The fear in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. She would leave. She would disappear. And I would be free. Anna gathered her things in a daze, not saying a word as she walked out the door for the last time. I watched her leave, feeling a sense of calm wash over me. It was done. The nightmare was over. But as I stood there, in the silence of the house, I realized something. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about taking back control. About making sure no one would ever have that kind of power over me again. And as for Anna, she would spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, wondering when her past would finally catch up with her. Days passed after Anna left, and for the first time in months, I felt like I had my life back. The house was quieter, but it no longer suffocated me with tension and dread. I had severed ties with the woman who had destroyed everything, and I had the satisfaction of knowing she would never fully escape the consequences of her actions. The files were safe with my lawyer, ready to ruin her if she dared try anything. Or so I thought. It was a Saturday afternoon, and I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through paperwork when I heard a knock on the door. My stomach tightened. It had been quiet for a while, and I hadn't expected any visitors. I stood up cautiously, peering through the small window. My heart nearly stopped. It was Anna. She stood there on the porch, her face pale but composed, her eyes fixed on the door as if she had rehearsed this moment. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. What was she doing here? Had she come to beg for forgiveness? Had she finally realized there was no winning this game? I opened the door slowly, trying to mask the mixture of anger and surprise swirling inside me. "You've got some nerve showing up here," I said coldly, blocking her entrance. She didn't flinch. "Tom," she said softly, her voice far different from the last time I heard it. There was no arrogance, no venom. "I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms, leaning against the doorframe. "What could you possibly have to say that I would want to hear?" Anna sighed, glancing over her shoulder nervously, like she was afraid someone might be watching. "This isn't about what you think. I need your help." "Ich zerre hier," baffled. "My help?" I nearly laughed at the absurdity of it. "Why would I help you, Anna? After everything you've done?" Her eyes filled with something I hadn't expected: fear. Real, genuine fear. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could answer, there was another knock on the door, this time more forceful. We both froze. My pulse quickened as I glanced past her to see 2 men standing on the porch. They weren't dressed casually like neighbors or door-to-door salesmen. No, these men had a different look to them, rough, intimidating, and I could see it in their eyes. They weren't here for a friendly chat. "What the hell is going on, Anna?" I whispered harshly, my heart pounding. She turned to look at them, panic flashing across her face. "I didn't think they'd come here so soon," she murmured. The men knocked again, harder this time, and one of them called out, "Open up. We know she's in there." Anna grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin as she pushed past me into the house. "Tom, please just listen to me. They're after me. I need somewhere to hide." I closed the door, turning to her in disbelief. "Who are they?" She glanced back, lowering her voice to a frantic whisper. "People I used to work with. People I owe money to. A lot of money." I stepped back, shaking my head. "This isn't my problem, Anna. You got yourself into this mess, and I'm not bailing you out." Her expression grew more desperate. "Tom, please. You don't understand. They'll kill me." The words hung in the air like a ticking bomb. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what she was saying. All the secrets, the shady business deals, the money laundering. Suddenly it all clicked. These weren't just small-time players she had been involved with. She had gotten in deep with people far more dangerous than I had realized. I glanced out the window, my heart pounding. The men were still there, waiting, watching. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. I had every reason to let them take her, to let her suffer the consequences of her actions. But there was something about the fear in her eyes, the genuine terror that made me pause. I hated her. I hated everything she had done to me. But was I really going to stand by and let her be killed? "Please, Tom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "If you don't help me, I'm dead." I gritted my teeth, torn between my anger and the reality of the situation. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was life or death. "Fine," I muttered, grabbing her arm and pulling her further into the house. "But you're going to tell me everything. Now." We hurried into the kitchen, my mind racing as I tried to think of a plan. I could hear the men outside, their voices growing louder, angrier. I didn't have much time. "Who are they?" I demanded, grabbing her shoulders and forcing her to look at me. "What do they want?" Anna's eyes darted around the room as if she could feel the walls closing in. "They're loan sharks," she admitted quietly. "I borrowed money from them to fund one of my side businesses. I thought I could pay them back, but things went wrong and now they're after me." "How much do you owe them?" Her face paled. 200,000. I let go of her, pacing the room as I tried to wrap my head around the situation. "Jesus, Anna. You didn't just screw up. You've got yourself buried in this." She flinched but didn't respond. I looked at her, wondering how the hell this had all spiraled so far out of control. And then a new thought occurred to me. "What do you think they'll do when they realize you don't have the money?" I asked quietly. Anna swallowed hard. "They don't want me to just disappear. They want to make an example of me." The implications of her words sank in. She wasn't just running from her mistakes. She was running from men who would kill her just to send a message. I stood there, wrestling with the weight of the decision. She had destroyed my life, humiliated me in every way possible. And now she was here, asking me to save her. Every instinct told me to turn her away, to let her face the consequences of her choices. But the fear in her eyes was real. If I did nothing, she would die. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Here's what we're going to do. Within moments, I had her hidden in the basement, the door locked from the inside. It was dark and cramped down there, but it was the best I could do on short notice. I grabbed my phone, dialing Derek's number, my hands shaking. He picked up immediately, his voice tense. "Tom? What the hell's going on?" "You need to get here now," I whispered. "Anna's in deep shit with some people. They're at my house. I don't know how long I can hold them off." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, Derek cursed softly. "I'm on my way. Don't let them in." I hung up, my heart racing. The men outside were getting impatient, banging on the door harder now. I knew it was only a matter of time before they tried to force their way in. 20 minutes later, Derek arrived with backup, 2 guys who looked as rough as the men outside. They weren't the law, but they had the muscle to handle this situation. Derek exchanged a few words with the men outside, and I watched as the tension dissipated. By some miracle, they left, though I knew it wasn't over. They would be back. Inside, Derek shook his head, wiping sweat from his brow. "She's in a world of trouble, Tom. This won't go away easily." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Anna had nearly ruined my life, but now it seemed her own was hanging by a thread.